Your brain chose who you love. What if I told you that you never actually chose the person you love? That the decision was made for you long before you realized it? Sounds impossible, right? But your brain has been playing matchmaker all along. The flutter in your stomach when you saw them for the first time. That instant pull you couldn't explain. You might think it was chemistry or fate or some spiritual bond, but in truth, it was your limbic system lighting up like a switch. Your brain responded to tiny cues, the shape of their face, the tone of their voice, the way they moved. It wasn't love at first sight, it was neural recognition. Your subconscious mind picked up patterns and made a call before you ever got the chance to say yes. Scientists have found that the parts of your brain responsible for reward, memory, and emotion all light up when you encounter someone you're drawn to. These aren't random reactions. They're ancient systems built for one purpose: survival through connection. Your body floods with dopamine, your pupils dilate, your heartbeat quickens. You think it's magic, but it's chemistry, precise, predictable, and shockingly involuntary. So if your brain is the one choosing who you fall for, what does that say about free will, and more importantly, what does that say about monogamy? We've been told that being with one person forever is natural, that it's a choice we consciously make. But if your brain selected your partner without asking you, can you really trust that you're built for lifelong commitment? Or are we clinging to a romantic myth that doesn't match our biology? To understand the truth, we need to go deeper. Before we can talk about loyalty or long-term love, we need to explore something far more dangerous: the quiet destroyer of connection that creeps into nearly every relationship. Insecurity. Why so many couples feel insecure? Emma and Daniel had what most people would call the perfect relationship. They laughed at the same jokes, shared the same values, and never seemed to run out of things to talk about. In the early days, their connection was effortless, natural, magnetic. But somewhere along the way, something shifted. It wasn't a dramatic betrayal. It wasn't even a clear problem. It started with a delayed reply to a message, then a subtle change in tone, a missed call, a weekend plan that didn't include the other. Nothing significant on the surface, but enough to plant a seed of doubt, and that seed grew quietly into something far more dangerous. Insecurity. It began to show up in small ways. Emma started asking questions she never used to ask. Where were you? Who were you? With Daniel began double-checking her phone screen when it lit up. They both felt it, that subtle tension, that invisible wall that hadn't been there before, the kind of discomfort you can't point to, but you feel in your bones. The connection they once trusted now felt fragile, unsteady, like it could crack at any moment. This story is more common than you think. In fact, it's nearly universal. According to Dr. Helen Fisher, a biological anthropologist who has studied love and attachment for decades, romantic relationships are inherently vulnerable to emotional insecurity. Her research shows that the same brain regions activated by physical pain are also triggered when people feel socially rejected or excluded by someone they love. That means emotional pain in relationships isn't just metaphorical, it's real, it's neurological, and it doesn't take betrayal to feel it. Often, the most corrosive form of pain comes from ambiguity, when your partner pulls away emotionally, when they seem distracted, less present, or emotionally unavailable. Your brain doesn't wait for proof, it assumes danger, it prepares for loss. That's when jealousy creeps in. You become hyper-aware of every message, every social media like, every late-night conversation. And even if they're doing nothing wrong, your mind starts building a story, one that's filled with worst-case scenarios. Insecure attachment is not just a personality flaw. It's often a symptom of deeper psychological patterns. People who have experienced inconsistency in childhood, emotional neglect, or betrayal in previous relationships are more likely to develop what psychologists call an anxious attachment style. These individuals crave closeness but fear abandonment. They become hypersensitive to signs of disconnection, often interpreting neutral behavior as a threat. And when they feel unsafe, they seek control. That's when love turns into surveillance. When "where are you" isn't just curiosity but suspicion. When "I miss you" starts to mean "are you drifting away from me?" Control masks itself as concern, but the more you try to control, the more the other person pulls away. The cycle feeds itself. What makes this worse is how modern relationships are shaped by digital culture. Constant access to our partners through messaging, calls, and social media gives us more data but less clarity. We mistake availability for intimacy, presence for connection. And when that stream of validation pauses for even a moment, our minds panic. Emma and Daniel didn't fall apart because one of them cheated. They fell apart because insecurity made them doubt what was once certain. And in doing so, they stopped giving each other the benefit of the doubt. They replaced trust with analysis, warmth with defense, love with fear. And yet, here's the truth we often avoid: most insecurity doesn't begin with what our partner is doing. It begins with how we feel about ourselves when we are with them. It comes from our own fear of not being enough, of being abandoned, of being replaced. These fears don't always speak out loud. They whisper in small questions, in silent doubts, in the things we don't say but desperately want to. So why do so many people feel insecure in relationships, even when their partner is kind and loyal? Because deep down, we're not just afraid of losing them. We're afraid that if they saw us completely, they might not choose us again. And that fear lives inside even the most loving hearts. But fear is not the same as truth, and insecurity is not always a sign of a broken relationship. Sometimes it's just a sign of a wound that hasn't healed, a wound that existed long before this love even began. So the question is not just how to fix insecurity. It's how to understand the conflict that created it in the first place. And that leads us to something even deeper. What is it inside our minds that makes us feel so torn, even when we love someone fully? What drives that inner split between holding on and pushing away? Between wanting to trust and fearing the worst? To answer that, we need to confront the silent war within us. The clash between desire and commitment, the very next layer of the human heart. The inner conflict between desire and commitment. Inside every relationship, even the most loving ones, there's a quiet battle playing out. It doesn't always show up in arguments or dramatic betrayals. Often, it shows up in silence, in hesitation, in the late-night thoughts we don't dare admit. On one side, we crave deep emotional connection. The safety of knowing someone is there for us, the comfort of shared memories, inside jokes, and a rhythm of trust. We want to feel seen, understood, and chosen again and again. That's the part of us that seeks commitment. But on the other side, there's another force pulling at us, a restless energy, a hunger for novelty, the thrill of the unknown. The part of us that lights up when someone new enters the room, that wonders what it would be like to start over, to feel wanted by someone who doesn't yet know our flaws. This isn't just temptation, It's biology, and it's where our mind begins to split. This split is known in psychology as cognitive dissonance. It's the tension we feel when our actions, beliefs, or desires are in conflict. For example, we may truly believe in loyalty. We may deeply love our partner, but at the same time, we find ourselves attracted to someone else. We flirt, we fantasize, we entertain a thought we swore we never would. And afterward, we feel confused or guilty, even ashamed, because we don't understand how both feelings can exist at the same time. Let's be honest, most people have experienced this dissonance at some point. A married man who adores his wife but still sends private messages to someone from work. A woman who's loyal to her partner but feels a spark when she bumps into an old flame. These moments don't necessarily mean they want to leave the relationship, but they reveal something important. That love and desire don't always move in the same direction. It's easy to think that if you love someone, you should never want anyone else. That true commitment should cancel out every other impulse. But human nature is more complex than that. We are wired for both bonding and exploration, for stability and stimulation, for home and for curiosity. This duality doesn't make us broken, it makes us human. The danger isn't in having conflicting feelings. It's in pretending those feelings don't exist. When we suppress them or judge ourselves too harshly, we create more shame, and that shame only fuels more disconnection. Instead, we need to understand that desire doesn't always mean disloyalty, attraction doesn't always mean action, and impulse doesn't erase intention. Real commitment isn't about never being tempted, it's about how we respond when we are. It's about recognizing the tension and choosing to act in alignment with our values, not just our urges, but to do that, we have to first admit that the conflict is real, that it lives in all of us, and that managing it is part of loving consciously. So if you've ever felt torn between the person you love and a fleeting desire for someone else, you're not alone. That tug of war happens inside nearly every human heart. It doesn't mean you're failing. It means you're alive. It means you're navigating the messy, beautiful tension between connection and curiosity. And here's the truth most of the time. We're not fighting against our partner. We're fighting within ourselves, between who we want to be and what part of us wants right now. Between what feels good in the moment and what we know will last. Love isn't the absence of that battle. It's the decision to keep showing up in spite of it. So what do we do with this knowledge? How do we live with the pull of desire while honoring the promise of commitment? If we are this conflicted inside, can neuroscience offer us a deeper understanding of what love truly is and how monogamy fits into that equation? Maybe the answers don't lie in our hearts at all, but in the architecture of the brain itself. What science says about love and monogamy. If you want to understand love, don't just look to poetry or fairy tales. Look to chemistry. Because behind every racing heart and whispered "I love you" is a cascade of molecules firing inside your brain. Love, as romantic as it feels, is largely biological. And two of the most powerful players in this emotional symphony are oxytocin and vasopressin. Oxytocin is often called the bonding hormone. It surges during moments of intimacy like hugging, kissing, or even eye contact. It helps you feel emotionally safe. It fosters trust. It's what makes you feel close to someone even after a short but meaningful interaction. This is the hormone that whispers, "You can open up now. You're safe here." Then comes vasopressin. While oxytocin brings you close, vasopressin keeps you there. It plays a central role in attachment, loyalty, and long-term bonding. It's also linked to possessiveness and the desire to protect your partner. This is the chemical that says, "You're mine, and I don't want to lose you." Together, these two hormones create a biochemical foundation for what we call love. But what triggers them in the first place? The answer is everything your senses can pick up in the first few seconds. Researchers have found that the brain reacts to signals of attraction almost instantly. The tone of a person's voice, the way they walk, the symmetry of their face, even their scent. These subtle cues activate deep brain structures tied to reward and pleasure. In fact, studies using brain imaging show that people who are newly in love experience intense activity in the ventral tegmental area, a part of the brain associated with motivation, craving, and goal-directed behavior. Love literally hijacks the same system involved in addiction. That's why the early stages of romance feel so intoxicating. You're not just attracted, you're chemically driven. And here's the most fascinating part. Your brain often makes its decision before you consciously realize it. Long before you think, "I really like this person," your body has already responded. Your pupils dilate, your heart rate increases, your voice shifts slightly. Your brain has scanned their face, picked up on micro-expressions, and compared them against countless past patterns. In less than a second, it begins preparing you for connection. This means that the feeling of just knowing when someone is right for you isn't magic. It's prediction. Your brain is constantly processing signals, weighing odds and making calls. And often, those calls feel like fate. So when people say love is a choice, they're only partly right. Yes, we choose to commit, we choose to stay. But the initial spark, that's chemistry doing what it's designed to do. Love begins as a biological event, not an intellectual decision. And what about monogamy? Scientists have studied species that form monogamous bonds and found they typically have higher levels of oxytocin and vasopressin receptor activity. In humans, these hormones support the formation of pair bonds. But biology doesn't guarantee lifelong fidelity. It only lays the groundwork, which brings us to a crucial truth. Love starts with the brain, but sustaining it requires more than chemical fireworks. It requires awareness, intention, and emotional honesty. Still, if the brain is capable of choosing so precisely, why do we still find ourselves doubting? Why do some people lie, cheat, or pretend to love when they don't? If love begins as a biological connection, is there a way to detect when someone is being real or when they're just playing the part? That's what we need to explore next. How to tell if someone is lying about love. Love can feel like the most honest thing in the world. But sometimes it isn't. Sometimes what sounds like love is actually fear, manipulation, or a carefully crafted illusion. And while words can be sweet and convincing, the body often tells a different story. So how do you know when someone is not being fully honest about how they feel? The first clue is eye contact. When people lie, they tend to avoid your gaze. Not always, but often enough to notice. If someone usually looks at you when speaking but suddenly starts glancing away, especially during emotional conversations, that shift can mean something. Then there's the voice. Studies have shown that liars often change the pitch or pace of their speech. Their voice might tremble slightly or become overly steady like it's rehearsed. You may also notice longer pauses between questions and answers, or answers that seem overly calculated. This hesitation is your second clue. Next is the timing of their reactions. Honest emotions usually flow naturally. They follow rhythm. But when someone is faking a feeling, their expressions might lag. The smile comes a beat too late. The laugh sounds forced. The gestures feel robotic. Authenticity lives in spontaneity. Deception often hides in delay. Dr. Paul Ekman, a leading expert on facial expressions and deception, famously said, "The body never lies. Even when words are perfect, the body leaks truth. It's in the clenched jaw, the fidgeting hands, the sudden change in breathing. These aren't definitive proof, but they are signals worth watching." So how can you tell when something feels off? Try asking the same question in a different way and watch how the answer changes. Sit in silence after their response and give space for their body to speak. Often, people fill silence with truth when they don't know what else to say. Listen not just with your ears, but with your attention. Focus not just on what they say, but how they say it. Another trick is to notice their breathing. Shallow, uneven breath can signal anxiety or emotional dissonance. When someone is lying, their body feels the stress of holding two truths, the one they know and the one they speak. This isn't about becoming paranoid. It's about becoming present. Trust is not blind. Real trust comes from being observant, from seeing patterns and paying attention when they shift, from listening closely to both the music and the silence between the notes. We often give people the benefit of the doubt because we want the love to be real. But wanting something to be true doesn't make it true. Look with clarity, not with fear. Because only when you see clearly can you respond wisely. And once you see the truth, once you recognize a break in connection, the real question is no longer, are they lying? The real question becomes, how do we rebuild trust when it's already cracked? How to build real trust and intimacy. Trust doesn't rebuild itself. It's not automatic. It's not a feeling that just returns once time passes. Trust is rebuilt one small action at a time. And intimacy, the deep emotional closeness we all crave, is not born from grand gestures. It's built in the quiet moments when we choose to show up, even when it's hard. The first step is communication without judgment. When your partner shares something, especially something difficult, your job isn't to fix it or fight it. Your job is to hold space, listen without interrupting, respond without attacking. Let their truth exist, even if it makes you uncomfortable. Because safety begins when we stop punishing vulnerability. The second step is to create a space where fear can be spoken out loud. Ask your partner, what are you afraid of right now in this relationship, and be ready to share your own answer too. Fear is not weakness, it's information. And when you bring it into the open, it loses its power to sabotage silently. One of the most powerful habits you can practice together is a weekly check-in. Set aside just 10 minutes and ask each other one simple question. What made you feel loved this week? The answers will surprise you. It might be a gesture you didn't think mattered, a word you said in passing, a moment of presence you barely noticed. And through that question, you learn how to love them better, not by guessing, but by listening. These practices aren't dramatic, but they are transformative. Because intimacy is not built on intensity, it's built on consistency, the daily choice to care, the daily effort to understand, the daily commitment to keep your promises, even when it's inconvenient. Loving someone doesn't mean you'll never hurt them, but rebuilding trust means you take responsibility for the hurt, and you actively choose to be safer going forward. It means you stop defending your intentions and start acknowledging their experience. Trust grows when words match actions. When care isn't just spoken, but shown. When the small things like remembering a story, Checking in during a hard day, or simply saying "I'm with you" are repeated again and again until they become a new rhythm. And here's the truth. Real love is not effortless. It's not found. It's formed. And the couples who last are not the ones who never break. They're the ones who learn how to rebuild. Because when you understand how love works, when you understand how trust is earned, you're no longer afraid to face what comes next. You're finally ready for the biggest question in any relationship. So, do you still believe in monogamy? We've come a long way in this journey. And if you've followed closely, you've likely seen love in a way you haven't before. We started with a shocking truth that your brain, not your heart, chose who you fell in love with. That what felt like destiny was actually chemistry. That the flutter in your chest was a pattern recognition system deep in your brain firing off in less than a second. We uncovered how love isn't a magical feeling that floats through the air. It's a biological reaction, a surge of oxytocin and vasopressin shaping your emotions, driving your connections, anchoring you to someone before you even understand why. And while these chemicals build bonds, they don't promise permanence. We looked into the discomfort so many couples feel, how insecurity creeps in, not always because of betrayal, but because of internal fears and unresolved patterns. How we crave commitment yet still feel the pull of desire, and how monogamy isn't just a romantic vow, it's a conscious practice. A discipline of choosing someone again and again, even when instinct whispers otherwise. Loyalty, we learned, isn't a switch you flip, it's a muscle you strengthen. And real trust, it's not granted by love alone, it's earned through action, consistency, and presence. So now, with all of that in mind, let me ask you again. Now that you know how your brain works, now that you understand what love truly is and what it isn't, do you still believe in monogamy? Or will you begin to see love not as something we fall into, but something we learn to practice with open eyes and honest effort? Let's talk about it. Scroll down and share your perspective in the comments. Whether you believe in one great love or many deep connections, your experience matters. And so does your voice, because in the end, the truth can shake us. It can unsettle what we thought we knew. But sometimes that's exactly what we need. The truth may shake your beliefs, but it also makes you love more clearly, more honestly, and more deeply than ever before.